Good day, everyone, and thank you for joining. Today's workshop is a part of DST-CPR's Open Science South Asian Networks initiative and is organized jointly by Indian Institute of Science Library, DST-CPR IIC, and datasets. Today's workshop is focused on unlocking repositories through persistent identifiers, enabling open research practices. The discussions on open science put a renewed interest in the institutional repositories. Institutional repositories can play a crucial role in open science by facilitating research data and article sharing. However, to make research article discoverable and to make research data fair, we need persistent identifier. PIDs are unique and permanent identifiers that can be used to identify and cite research output over time. This is important for open research because it allows researchers to share their work with others and to track their impact. So if there is any object that is stored in the data repository, institutional data repository, they would need PIDs to cite it, to make it discoverable, and also, of course, to track its impact. Digital Object Identifier, DOI, is a type of PID, and we will explore the use and necessities of DOI in this workshop. And that's where the role of datasets comes in, because datasets is a nonprofit organization and who provides DOIs to many repositories such as Zenodo. So in today's workshop, we will cover the following topic: introduction to persistent identifiers and their importance, making institutions' research data fair, the value of integrating repositories with DOIs, and data science global access program in fostering PIDs adoption worldwide. For today's workshop, we have three speakers, and these three speakers will speak, and we will take the questions at the end of the whole session. So today's first speaker is Dr. Francis Jacob. He is the scientific officer at JRD Tata Library, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and an open access advocate. IS's repository is the oldest in India, and he has been associated with this initiative from the inception. I would request Dr. Francis to share his thought on institutional repositories and as well as on the data repositories and the need to share data. Dr. Francis, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maumita. And good afternoon, all the panelists. Good afternoon, all the participants. As Maumita said, we will have three presentations. So I will talk about, Mohammed and Gabriela will talk about the DOI perspective or the PID perspective for an institutional repository, institutional data repository. And before they do that, I thought, let me very quickly run through the importance of institutional data repository. Now, for the audience who are participating in this event, all of you are very familiar with the concept of institutional repository itself, which emerged with the emergence of the open access concept in the late 90s or so. So the concept of institutional repository for research publications is very well established, and it's very well put to practice, and the library community is very familiar with it. And many of the libraries across the world have taken the initiative in setting up and maintaining institutional repositories for research publications. Now, the research institutional repositories for data, research data, although the idea and the concept is quite old, I would say it's almost 15 years old since the importance for institutional data repositories have they gained importance for the last decade or so. But it has not really caught up, especially in India. Now, if you look at the re3data.org, one of the registries, to find out what data repositories exists in the country. Now, although it lists about 60 odd repositories, but none of these repositories are from an academic institute, from an academic institutions. Although there are 60 odd repositories listed there, now most of these repositories pertain to government data and other ministries and departments, both from the central and the state governments. But very surprisingly, I didn't come across any repository from an academic institution. I'm not sure how up to date the registry is, but as of yesterday, I didn't see a single academic institution being listed in re3data.org. Okay, so there is a need for the institutions to especially the libraries associated with the institutions, to take on priority in setting up institutional data repositories so that they can interlink the repository that they already have for research publications with the corresponding data repositories.
Dr. Francis, sorry,
Yeah.
will you share the screen now or?
Yeah, I will. So
okay,
I'm not started my.
Oh, okay. Sorry to interrupt.
So that the data can be preserved a long time, and there are many advantages of having a data repository, which we will shortly look into, and the libraries should come forward and take the lead. So this is just a beginning. Going forward, we hope to conduct several more workshops, practical workshops, wherein we will try to impart training in setting up and maintaining institutional data repository. Now, if you would kindly excuse me, I would turn off my video and I will share my screen and start my presentation. So I've just shared my screen. So can I get a feedback about the visibility of my
yes,
screen?
It's visible. It's visible.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. So so I have prepared my present talk for about 20-23 slides. So in the interest of time, I may not go through each and every slide, but I will broadly touch upon the points that have listed here. I will start with an introduction, then I will talk about research data and its importance and its impact on scientific progress. And then having research data, how do you manage it? So research data management, what are the challenges associated with the research data management? And then how do you manage research data? So we need to have a research data repository for that. And then there are already several data repositories. And then if one wants to find what are the, how does one go about? Okay, and then so there are different types of data repositories, and one of the types is institutional data repository. So what services do the institutional data repositories provide? What role does data IRs play? And then how does one go about in implementing data IR? And then are there any funding and support mechanism for implementing an institutional data? And then what is the vision of my library in setting up our institute's data repository? So these are the points I will be broadly touching upon. Now, in the recent decades, there has been explosion of computational power and the availability of big data. Now, these have revolutionized research that is carried out in various fields. Now, these days, research is data-driven. Now, be it in the field of science or engineering or social science or humanities, now it's all predominantly data-driven research. During a research process, the researchers collect data. Now, the data is so collected during the process of research has to be managed. Now, these days, as we know, we need the requisite IT infrastructure to manage the data that is collected, analyzed, and then make inferences and conclusions. Okay, so management of research data becomes extremely important, and that's where the role of data repositories come in. Okay, so the data repositories, they serve as a centralized platforms for managing research data during the, not just during the course of research investigation, but for posterity. And in the process now, in the present context, in the context of open access, open research, and open science, sharing that research data that has been so painstakingly and so much of time has been devoted for that. So you need platforms for managing research data that's been collected, and you need to preserve that. And then, you know, you have to share that so that it helps in various other ways, which we will be talk about. So when the research data is shared openly, what does it entail? So it facilitates transparency, and it facilitates collaboration, and in the process there is a scientific progress involved. Okay, so there are several benefits in setting up research data repositories and then making data in such repositories open. Okay. Of course, there are challenges in implementing data repositories. So we will see what those challenges are. And then if one has to explore the funding possibilities, opportunities, both nationally and internationally. So I will very briefly touch upon that also. So let's get started with what research data is. So research data is essentially a raw material that the researchers collect, process, and undertake studies on that while carrying out research investigation. Okay, so it essentially serves as a basis that substantiates published research findings. Okay, now depending on the field in which the research is carried out, now be it in the domain of science or engineering or humanities, there are one or more than one way of collecting research data. Now, it could be by way of observation, it could be through experiments, it could be through simulation, or it could be derived or compiled data, or it could be referential data. Okay, so depending on the field, so it could be any one of these methods, or it could be a combination of these methods to collect research material which serves as a raw material for the research in hand. So importance of research data and its impact on scientific progress. Okay. Okay. So now when the data is openly available, so that it becomes easily findable, and others can make use of data, then there is scope for verifying the research that has been derived or research that has been concluded from the raw material that has been collected for the research purpose. So when the data is openly shared, someone else can verify the data, they can build upon it, they can identify the potential errors and also shortcomings. Okay, so this is one very important aspect, that when the data is openly available, then others can verify the results. And also, if required, the methods, the assumptions, and the conclusions can be reproduced. So that possibility becomes possible only when the data that is being used for research investigation has been made openly available. And there is transparency and then accountability. Okay, now, when the data is openly available and when somebody can verify and reproduce it, and they can find out, I mean, whether there has been any bias in while interpreting the data, and it also enhances the integrity of the research itself. When data is openly available and when other people can easily find such data, then it gives scope for collaboration. Now, people from other domains may get interested and collaborate with. There is a scope for collaboration. There is scope for interdisciplinary collaboration. And then when complex problems are done collaboratively, then finding solution becomes faster and easier. So openness of data facilitates collaboration and innovation. Long-term impact and legacy. Now, today, the researchers have carried out research based on the data, the raw material that they gathered for their research work. And then they have drawn inferences, come to conclusions, and then they have tested their hypothesis, and they go on. So when the data is left behind, the next generation of researcher can revisit, can reevaluate the data, and then they can build upon it. So there's a scope for that. So for that to happen, one needs to have access to the data. Resource allocation and funding, okay? So especially when it comes to funding, when researcher is applying for a grant, and then if it is, they always see what the researchers, the previous contributions have been. Okay, so if a particular researcher has done quality research work and the data gathered is of good quality, and definitely that will give an edge for a researcher to get subsequent funding from the funding agencies. Okay. Okay. Now, definitely there are challenges in research data management. Now, first of all, in the present era of data-driven research, now depending on a domain, the amount of data that is gathered or amount of data that is required to carry out research investigation is surely dependent on a particular domain. Okay. Now, for example, certain domains, suppose if it is in the field of atmospheric science or environment, or if it is astronomy, the amount of data collected is enormous. So in order to store such enormous amount of data, you need requisite infrastructure for that. Okay. So now it's now many of the institutions, especially in the developing countries, may not have the required infrastructure and resources to sustain and support data of huge quantity for long term. Okay, so that's definitely one of the big challenges. Okay. Now, when it comes to awareness, now still many researchers are not have the requisite awareness about making the data open. Okay. Now, all that a researcher is concerned is achieving the desired results for a particular research project. Okay, they really don't appreciate in maintaining or doing a data management for the data that have collected and preserving it for posterity. So awareness has to be created amongst the researchers for awareness about the importance of long-term preservation of research data. And for that, the library is in a good position to offer requisite training to the researchers. Now, data security and privacy. Now, depending on what type of data is collected and what type of data is stored and shared. Okay, so the data security and privacy will play a significant role, and whoever is managing the data should be conscious about data security and data privacy. And so, as I said, there is no awareness. Generally, the awareness about data sharing is lacking amongst the researchers. Now, definitely with the concept of open research, open science catching up, and everybody becoming aware about the need for open access, so that culture is developing, but still that mindset is not there for every researcher. Okay, so the data share culture has to be imbibed into the researchers so that they'll come forward to share their research data. Otherwise, they're concerned about IPR, they're concerned about competition, and so because of they cite those reasons for not openly sharing that data. So it becomes the responsibility. So it becomes the responsibility of the institution and the libraries associated with the institutions to create data sharing culture amongst their researchers. Now, having data and then making such data interoperable and then making them standardized, it requires enrichment with metadata. So now different domains have different domain-specific metadata standards. Okay, so so adhering to these standards will definitely greatly help. But when we do data management and when we do data preservation, this aspect of interoperability and standardization has to be taken into consideration. Of course, long-term, the data one of the goals of having a data repository is its long-term preservation. Policy framework and institutional support also greatly helps. Now, if an institution, if we have a policy, or open access policy, open access mandate, either at the national level or at the institutional level, then it becomes much easier to implement open access mandate in a particular institution. Okay, so institutions should come out with open access mandate, not just for research publications, but for research data as well. And then we need to have a requisite institutional support as far as the infrastructure that is required for data management. So what is a data repository? So according to V3 data, it's a subtype of sustainable information infrastructure which provides long-term storage and access to research data that is a basis for scholarly publication. Research data means information objects generated by scholarly projects, for example, through experiments, measurements, surveys, or interviews. So basically, research data is nothing but the raw data that I was referring to that is collected as a research investigation process. So that's what, that's research data, the raw materials, and then the management of raw data is done through research data repository. So there are different types of data repositories. Now we have institutional data repositories. Now, if you take Europe and North America, there are thousands of institutional data repositories which have been in existence for more than a decade now. So across, now it's mostly dominated by the Europe and the Western world. But when it comes to India, as I said in the beginning, we don't have institutional data repository from an academic institution yet. Or I may be wrong, because what I'm saying is as per the directories that I have looked into, and it's quite possible that some institutions already have, and then that it is not listed in any of the existing directories. But it's time that many of the, at least the big centrally funded institutions come out and have their own institutional data repositories so that they can curate the data generated in their respective institutions. Okay, so institutional data repository is broadly one of the three types of data repositories. Then there are domain-specific or disciplinary repositories. Okay, there are several of them, and some of the best examples include GeneBank. GeneBank has been in existence for a very long time, and the amount of data that is available is enormous. Okay, and then in the field of physiology, there is a PhysioNet, okay, which is maintained by National Institutes of Health, and there is one for political and social sciences. This is just a very few sample examples for domain-specific repositories that I have given here. Okay, and there are also general-purpose open repositories. Okay, now many researchers are already curating their data. It's that the libraries of those institutions are not aware of it. Okay, because some publishers insist that if the papers have to be accepted for publications, then the data has to be made openly available. And these are some of the open domains, open platforms on which research data can be saved for posterity. So Dryad is one, Figshare, Harvard Dataverse, Zenodo. Okay, and many of our researchers, including researchers from our own university, my own institutions, are having their research data on these platforms. Okay, and these platforms also assign persistent identifiers to the data set so that it becomes citable. So I was talking about registries, okay, so from which one can find out information about data repositories themselves, whether you want to find out with respect to how many repositories are there in a particular country, or how many...
Dr. Francis, sorry to interrupt. Please wrap it up in 5 minutes, because otherwise we will really run out of time from the
Okay,
webinar.
fine. Okay.
Thank you.
So there are some registries like the re3.data, Fair Sharing Catalog, and then Scientific Data Recommended Repositories. Okay. Now, an institutional data repository is one which is set up for the benefit of the faculty members and the students carrying out research in their respective universities or institutions. And it's a platform on which the data that is generated as part of a research investigation is curated. And the idea is for its long-term preservation and also for openly sharing the data. Okay. Now, having set up an institutional repository for data, so it offers several types of services. Now, one of the important services that an institutional data repository offers is assigning a assigning a PID. Okay, now PID can be a DOI, or it could be based on a handle system. Okay, so that's one important value addition apart from the data management services that the IR support, assigning PIDs for the data sets so that it becomes citable. Then once the research data is part of a data IR, when it is enriched with rich metadata, then the search engines harvest the metadata details, and in the process, the data sets become discoverable easily. And then if you already have a publications database, then you can link the publication database with the corresponding data set in the data repository. So I will just skip the other slides in the interests of time, and then I will just briefly talk about the vision for IAC libraries, vision for setting up IAC data IR. Okay. Okay, so now, as I said, we already have a research institutional repository for research publications. Now it's high time for us that we set up an institutional data repository. So the process has already started, and we would like to launch it at the earliest. And so the vision is to have a data IR for managing, preserving, and facilitating open access to research data that is generated from our institute. Okay. The data IR aims to foster a culture of open data sharing, and which in turn facilitates collaboration and transparency within and outside IAC community. So the key objective of IAC data include facilitate data sharing, enable researchers to self-archive, manage, and share their research data in a secure and user-friendly way. Encourage data sharing to foster collaboration and interdisciplinary research within and beyond IAC, and ensuring long-term preservation. And as I said, we already have not just one, we have two repositories, one for the research publications and the other for the thesis and dissertations. So the data generated both for the thesis work and also for research publications, if we have the corresponding data in the data IR, then they can be interlinked, and that will greatly add value to the IAC research. So with that, I will stop, and thank you very much for your patience listening.
Thank you, Dr. Francis. This was really a wonderful presentation, and I'm sure everybody enjoyed it, and more so they would have a lot of questions, and this probably with this we can also start the data repository, probably one of the first in our country from a institutional point of view. I will take the question at the end, because that's how we can actually combine if there are similar questions. So right now, then I will invite Gabby. So I will invite Gabriela Meyer. She is the Community and Program Manager of DataCite. She leads DataCite participation in the European Commission's funded project, Fair Impact. She also leads the Global Access Program of DataCite. She will talk about DataCite and how DOIs can help institutional repository. So without further ado, I would hand over it to Gabby. Gabby, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Mumita. Actually, we were preparing or planning to have Mohammed's presentation first because it's more like a general introduction. So if we can have Mohammed's presentation first, and then I will go to the second part.
Okay, sure. Then I then actually invite then Mohammed to take the floor. But before that, let me just introduce him. He's the regional engagement specialist at DataSite and looks after the engagement in Middle East and Asia. Mohammed joined DataSite in 2023, and he works with the community to build more openness and trust in scholarly infrastructure and supports emerging communities' transition toward open research and implementing its principles. So Mohammed and Gabby, you can take your flow in this presentation.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Momita. Let me share my screen. Yeah, before I start, I would like to thank Dr. Francis. I really enjoyed your presentation, and you highlighted the importance of the research data repository and the challenges as well in a fantastic way. So thank you so much, Dr. Francis. So yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Mohammed Mustafa, the Regional Engagement Specialist for the Middle East and Asia at DataSite. And today in my talk, I'm going to cover 3 important points. The first one is what are persistent identifiers and their relation with FAIR principles. And I am going to end with an introduction about DataSite. So we will start with the persistent identifier. So what is a persistent identifier? So it's a unique alphanumerical string, which is always referring to a digital resource. And it will always point to the same resource where the metadata information is presented. So PIDs can be used and assigned for people, and they can also be used for places, and they can also be used for things. We will explain that in details in the upcoming slides. So PIDs for people, so we mean by people in that context, we mean academic researchers, we mean translators, we mean contributors to the actual work itself. And we have a very important example for people or researcher identifier in this academic community case, which is ORCID ID. And then PIDs also can refer to and be assigned and used in the context of research organization. And in that case, we have ROR ID, Research Organization Registry. And in this screenshot that you all can see, it's the ROR ID of the Indian Institute of Science, which we are collaborating with them in this workshop. And then the key message that we want to spread also within this webinar is that DOIs that Dr. Francis highlighted and he said in his topic, their importance also, and I'm going to explain that in further details. They can be used for different research output. So usually journal article, we consider journal article, which is the common understanding now in the community is to use DOIs for journal articles, but they are just one part of the scholarly record. DOIs should be assigned and should be used for different research output, such as protocols, datasets, dissertation and thesis, and software tools as well that have been created during the research or conducting the research itself. So what is their value? How they can help the different research output? So they will help the different research output in increasing and enhancing their discoverability, the accessibility, the possibility of also getting more citation and reusability as well. So this is a screenshot from a DOI, which is assigned to a journal article. And this is a DOI also that is assigned and used for a data set. And this is a DOI that, as you can see, that has been assigned for a tool that has been created while conducting the research as well. By using the DOI, this tool now is visible. It's coming in the discovery databases and the discovery citation databases as well, and it's visible for the research community. DOIs are now also used for the preprint, the initial version of the article before submitting it to a specific journal or a publisher. So, for example, this is a screenshot from India Archive, the preprints repository server for India, and they are now integrating DOIs for preprints as well. And this is a screenshot from the different registered resources within a datasite. And as you can see, we support different research output beyond the journal article. So we have preprint, collection, book chapter, software, physical object as well. So now we talked about PIDs and the different type of PIDs. Now we are going to talk about the FAIR principles and their importance for the research data and how PIDs can support in that context. So the FAIR principles idea got introduced in this 2016 paper published in Nature Scientific Data Journal. And the ultimate goal of the FAIR principle is to optimize the reuse and maximize the reuse of the data as well. So they concluded 4 important principles: that the research data should be findable and should be also accessible and should be interoperable, and it should be also reusable. So regarding the first principle, findability of the data itself, as we all know, the first step in reusing or using a data set is to find this data. And metadata and the data should be easy to find for both humans, researchers, and computers as well. And in that case, the machine-readable metadata play a very important role in the discoverability and the findability of this data sets as well. And here will come the importance of the PIDs, because the metadata that are assigned to them are usually globally unique, and it can be included also within the persistent identifier. The second principle, which is accessibility. So once the user or the researcher in this case will find the required data, they would need to know how they can access and start using this data. And here again, the persistent identifier through the metadata which are retrievable via the identifier, because it uses a standard protocol, will make the data, the research data and its metadata information more accessible. And even when the data will not be available itself, the metadata information will always be there. Regarding the third principle, so the data usually need to be integrated, as we all know in the research workflows, the data need to be integrated with other data as well. This is how the research use. So I will use my data and build upon it from different data resources as well. So the data should work within different applications, and it should be able to work also within different workflows. And this can be for different purposes, whether analysis or storage or processing purposes as well. And here the persistent identifier will play an important role as well through the metadata which is stored within the persistent identifier, and make it accessible and shared broadly and work in a broader way with different system, and that will facilitate the knowledge representation as well. The last point in FAIR principle, which is the reusability of the data. And this is the ultimate goal of all the 4 FAIR principles, is to optimize the reuse of the data and help also to make these research data more reusable. And this here will come also again the importance of the persistent identifier, because it will, through the rich metadata, it can really help in the discoverability and reusability of the research data. So here a screenshot that I prepared, or we prepared, for the different PIDs and how they can work with different elements. So we have for data and software, we have DataCite, our organization, and also IGSN. We are collaborating with them now. And for the publication like journal article or the dataset, we have DataCite and the Crossref. And for the organization, as I explained, we have ROR ID for the research organizations as well. And we have for funder, we have Crossref funder ID, and we have ROR is providing support on that one as well. And we have research activity ID, and Crossref is working on the grants and the project. And of course, we have within this workflow, we have ORCID ID as a unique identifiers for the research contributors. So why are PIDs or persistent identifier are important? PIDs like DOIs for object items, or ORCID IDs for contributors, or ROR IDs for organization, they really increase the discoverability, accessibility, and they improve the ability of citations and reutilization as well, and they support the recognition of research output and resources. So this is the value of using these the different type of PIDs within the research workflow. So now I'm going to brief you very quickly about DataCite, and my colleague Gabby is going to highlight more details about our infrastructures and our global access program as well. So at DataCite, our vision is connecting research and identifying knowledge, and we are even updating that. So our aim is to connect research and advancing knowledge as well, which is something that we are really currently doing right now. So we are a non-profit organization created in the year 2009 by and for the research community. And this is a snapshot from our values. Now I'm going to share it in the next slide. So our core values is we provide DOIs or ways for our members to register DOIs and metadata as well that can help them to improve the discoverability and the reuse of their research output and resources as well. So we provide DOI metadata registration, and we provide support and maintenance. We have also content negotiation, and we have public open APIs that we allow third party to harvest our metadata information. And we also provide to our members best practices, guidelines, and adoption for our community. So we have a user-friendly systems and software that allow them to register their DOIs. We have detailed best practice documentation as well, and we work with 100% with our community. So we offer community coordination through our team, and we are always improving and developing our metadata schema. On top of that, we build tools and services that allow our members to track the impact, the influence of their research as well through our dashboard and analytics and our harvesting services and our graph APIs and the relation between the different metadata that we are registering. So this is a snapshot from our current community as of July 2023. So we have more than 2,800 institutional repositories, whether they are data repositories or institutional repositories that are just collecting different or wide spectrum of research output, such as datasets, dissertation, thesis, text, images, different type of research output. And we are working closely with 280 members from 50 countries, and we have more than 51 million DataCite DOIs. And we are also working closely with more than 1,300 organizations around the globe. We have a wide spectrum also of partners that we work closely with, such as Center for Open Science, Research Data Alliance, Crossref, and ORCID as well. So we work closely with these international partners. We have also our own initiative. So as of Jan 2023, we launched our Global Access Program, GAP. I got hired under this in the context of this program. And at the same time, we have two colleagues. One colleague is working in Africa and another colleague is working in Latin America. And our primary goal with our GAP program is to foster the global adoption for persistent identifier within the local communities as well. We want to share and raise the awareness among the community about the importance of having PIDs in general, using PIDs in general for the research workflow, and work with them in raising that awareness and increase the adoption in a global scale. We are also launching our Make a Data Count initiative, and we are working closely with the community on this. And the aim is to build policies around data citation metrics as well. So yeah, so keep an eye on our website, and there is a separate website for the initiative as well if you want to know more about Make Data Count. We are also taking an active part in different international projects who are collaborating with Crossref to build the event data. We are also have our DOI or built with the community, the DOI citation formatter, and we are also working with the European Open Science Cloud in the context of the Fair Impact project. So we fully understand that it's a collective effort and it's a community effort as well. So what we had, as you can see at the base of our pyramids, we help our members to register DOIs and the metadata so they can improve the visibility and discoverability of the resources, the different research output that they are registering by providing the DOI and the metadata, by helping and working with them, and providing also open and public APIs for third party to harvest and collect our open metadata information. And then on the second layer, as you can see, we work with our members as well to help them to adopt and implement the best practices. So we have simple interfaces and user-friendly web interfaces where our members can register and can start depositing their metadata information. And at the top, we work with our members as well so they can measure the impact, the influence of their research and the research also that they are funding by providing dashboard and analytics information and offering also harvesting services. So on the right side, you can see the different resource type that DataCite schema can support. And as you can see, there is a wide range of resource types that we can support. And as I said, one of the key messages that we want to spread is DOIs or Digital Object Identifier can support and can work in a very good way with different research resource type beyond the journal article. So they are not limited to the journal article. And in our metadata schema, we can support, for example, a book chapter, a data paper, a data set, a dissertation, a sound, a software code, a preprint, a peer review report, a physical object that has been collected during the research process. And on the left side, you can find some information about metadata schema as well. Within our metadata schema, we have 6 mandatory fields. The first one is the identifier, the DOI that we are going to provide in this case. And then we have the creator, the title, the publisher of the work itself, and the publication year, and the resource type. And then we have another 6 recommended metadata field. As you can see them, the subject, the date, the related identifier, and we have some optional fields as well, such as the size, the format, the rights, the related item. However, in general, we advise our member to provide as much metadata as they can and to provide rich metadata information, because we really believe that providing rich metadata can improve the visibility and enhance the discoverability of the specific resource that you are registering. So we encourage providing rich metadata information. So now we talked about the tools, the ways that we provide in getting the DOI and the Digital Object Identifier. The second part is connecting and finding that where all these DOIs are displayed and visible. So we developed DataCite Commons, our platform for displaying our DOIs. And we have also within that some DOIs that are coming from Crossref, and usually they are the DOIs that cited data sets that have got DataCite DOIs. And within Commons as well, it's integrated with ORCID. So as a contributor, for example, if you have a data set listed in DataCite Commons, you can add that work once to your ORCID, and then your ORCID record will be updated as well. And it's integrated with ROR and with repository registry re3 data. So you can find a data set through DataCite Commons. You can also track the citation. So we understand that citation for research data, this is a new thing for the community, and we are building that as well. So within DataCite Commons, you can track and find the citation for the research data as well. We are also supporting the recognition of the creators and their affiliation and their organization as well. So the last part in my presentation is regarding empowering the discoverability and how DataCite DOIs are visible and discoverable across different citation and discovery databases. So the first example, so this is a screenshot that I got from Dimension, and as we can see, this is a DataCite DOI, and this dataset is indexed in Dimension. We have another screenshot for this database, which is for a data set that is indexed in and listed in Google dataset search, which is an equal to Google Scholar, but for research data. And here also we have a screenshot from Clarivate. So this is the provider of the journal impact factor. They are well known for that. And at the same time, also they have their different product, which is data citation index, and using DOIs, your institutional repository can, if you work with them, can be visible also, and your research data can be visible there. And we also, our DOIs are discoverable in different databases. So this is ProQuest and OpenAir, and we have different examples, but for the sake of the time, I just brought these examples as well. And at the end, yeah, I just listed some useful resources like DataCite website, our global access program URL, and our roadmap, which is publicly available to everyone, so they can track our progress as well. Yeah, and all these slides and the recording, I think, will be shared, so you will have access to the useful links section as well. And these are our channels to communicate. So please do follow us at all these social media platforms. And if you have any questions, you are most welcome to email us at info@datasite.org. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Mohammed, for your introduction. And hi, everyone. I'm Gaby Mejias from DataCite. So now I will share my screen. And I'm going to speak about the DataCite infrastructure and the benefits both for institutions and researchers. So first, let me speak about DataCite implementation. So how can institutions really integrate our infrastructure into their systems and into their workflows? And there are three ways to do this. So DataCite membership allows institutions to register and manage DOIs for the repositories and also for other kind of systems. So this can be done in three ways. The first one is a manual or user interface called Fabrica. The second one is through using a registered service provider. And the third one is through our APIs, and I'm going to go into more detail in the next slides. So the first one is DOI Fabrica. So this is a user interface that we provide to our members. And basically, you log in to this platform with your member credentials, and you can set up or connect your repository or other platform. And this provides form where you can register the metadata and you can obtain at the end a DOI. So this is the easiest way to start registering DOIs for your organization. However, we recommend organizations to really enable an automated process for DOI registration, and this can be done in two ways. So one is through a service provider integration. DataCite has a service provider program, and we work with service providers that offers software for repositories and other kind of systems that already integrate with the DataCite API. So this means these software or systems already have an integration. So you as an institution don't have to develop anything. You just need to enter your member credentials into the system, and this will already activate the integration, and it will already register DOIs for your outputs. And here I have the list of supported integrations. So you can see that there are many repository systems that are already connected with DataCite, also CRIS, and publishing systems. And the third way is if you don't use any of the previous mentioned system, then you will need to develop your own API integration. So this means to integrate the DataCite API into your systems or into your workflows. So we offer a REST API, and this allows many functionalities. You can register and update DOIs. You can also retrieve DOI metadata. So you can also query more granular information like citations, usage reports, provenance, and information about prefixes and repositories. And if you're going to go through this way, then you will need to do some tests before. We have two environments: a production environment, that's where the live DOIs get registered. And for testing, we have a sandbox environment. This mirrors the production environment, but just registered tests DOI. So if you're going to develop your own API integration, we recommend you do tests in the sandbox environment first. And now I'm going to speak about the benefits of implementation. So if your institution integrates DOI and metadata registration in your repositories or system, you get increased visibility and discoverability of your institutional research production. You also enable more recognition, both for your institution, but also for your researchers and those at your institution who contribute to research. Your institutional production also gets both exposed and connected to the global research ecosystem, thanks to metadata and thanks to our open registry. So very important to say that our members register DOIs, and all the metadata they provide is publicly and openly available through a CC0 license. So the metadata is open to all, which also contributes to more visibility and discoverability. And thanks to our services and infrastructure, you can also track and demonstrate the impact of your research through reports and analytics. And when you join DataCite and as an institutional member, you become part of our community of practice that joins to identify research outputs and resources to promote open research practices. So I spoke a lot about tracking impact, demonstrating impact through analytics, and we actually provide a data metrics badge. And this badge was created as part of the Parsec project, and is a way, an easy way and an open way to display both citations and usage statistics for your repository. And these usage statistics are processed according to the Counter Code of Practice for research data, and citation stats are collected via the event data that Mohammed mentioned earlier. So the way it works is basically you need to insert an HTML snippet into your repository, and then you will be able to start tracking citations, views, and downloads. And you can also customize these widgets, so you can also choose how to visually display this information. So this is one option, this is another option, and there's more information on the link. And if you implement the widget, this is how we expose this information to the global community through the DataCite registry. DataCite Commons is the user interface. And this is an example from the World Agroforestry Center from Kenya. So you can see all the works the repository has, the citations, the views, and the downloads. And you can also find other information like the ROR identifier for this organization and connected organization identifiers as well. And you can also see this as an organization from Kenya, nonprofit, and is member of a DataCite consortium. And you can also see some visualizations from their production, and there are more granular details and graphics that I have not included in this slide. And also wanted to share some success stories from our members. As Mohammed mentioned before, we are a global community and we have members in across 50 countries. One of our members is the National University of Rosario in Argentina. And they recently participated in a webinar with us. And for that, they shared some success stories and testimonies from their researchers. And here you can see how setting up this repository, they have a Dataverse repository, and it's connected to DataSets to register DOIs. So you can see how this researcher has benefit from this repository, and says that they have benefit with more visibility through the data downloads and citations, and that depositing the data in this institutional repository allows them to have some peace of mind, knowing that if they ever lose the files, they will still have the data into the repository. Also mentioning this raw data that Dr. Francis mentioned during his presentation, that they are depositing raw data so that other members of the scientific community can see this data and reuse it for their research and promote more collaboration, and that they get more visibility and social relevance for their data. And here you can see the R3 data record of this repository. Dr. Francis also mentioned this initiative. DataCite is part of this initiative. R3 data is the registry of research data repositories. Another success story from the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture in Nigeria, which is also a DataCite member, and they also participated in a webinar recently with us to share their success story. And then they mentioned that they benefit from the data metrics, that they are able to both measure the data, get citation metrics, and have better insight on their data reusability and their impact. They also very interesting that they said that integrating DataCite into the repository enabled more job opportunities in their institution, and also required capacity building and training. So they saw this as a benefit, and that the standardization of research data helped them, as well that DataCite, integrating DataCite API helped them standardize their data. They also are developing DMP templates. So they are opening up more information about the research process, which is a way of practicing open research. And this is a snapshot of the repository, which is built on CCAN. If your institution would be interested in becoming a member, we have 3 different types of membership. Your institution can become a direct member. Your institution could also become a consortium lead. We have a consortia program, and consortia, DataSite consortia, are groups of 5 or more institutions that come together to implement a broader approach to implementation, for example, on a national or regional level. And your institution can also be a consortium organization, so joining one of our existing consortia. We have currently more than 50 consortia across continents. We don't have an Indian consortium yet. So should you be interested in becoming a member, there's more information on these links. And of course, you can contact Mohammed, who can give you more information about the process. And finally, how we are trying to promote more equity and inclusion across the research ecosystem. So I've mentioned before that we're a global community, that we have members in 50 countries. Actually, we have members in every continent except Antarctica. But still, most of our institutional members come from Europe or from North America. So this is one of the challenges for the global adoption of this infrastructure. Another challenge we've identified across the years is that in many countries, there are institutions that are interested in registering DOIs for their data, for their outputs, but they lack the underlying infrastructure to do this. For example, they don't have a repository or a system that can automate the registration of DOIs. In some countries and regions as well, there's a low awareness of the value of persistent identifiers, which makes membership more difficult, and of course, as well, financial barriers. So to address all these challenges, earlier this year in January, we launched our Global Access Program with the support of the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative to promote more equity in the global research ecosystem. So what we want to do with this program is enable more organizations across Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East to access and benefit from our infrastructure. This program has 3 areas of focus. The first one is funding. So thanks to the funding we received from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, we will provide funding to the community to be able to develop outreach activities, infrastructure development, using or to be able to use our infrastructure. We're going to launch the call for proposals in September. So stay tuned for more updates on this if you'd be interested in applying for funding. We're also going to support the community through technical infrastructure. So we want to establish partnerships with local and international organizations to support communities in these regions to build technical infrastructure that can enable them to benefit from DOIs and also outreach. So we want to partner with local communities that want to work with us to increase the awareness of PID infrastructure. And this webinar with Ozan and I ISC is an example of that kind of collaboration. And the goal, again, of this program is to have a more equitable and inclusive research ecosystem. So we want to do this through collaboration and partnerships. We've also, as part of this program, we hired 3 colleagues in Africa, in Latin America, and Mohammed in Middle East and Asia to support this program. And what we want to achieve is that all researchers and organizations and communities have the tools and awareness to benefit from persistent identifier infrastructure. And if you're interested in joining our collective effort, you can start by registering DOIs for your research outputs and resources. Include rich metadata. This is very important. The more metadata you register when you register your DOIs, the more visibility and discoverability for your research, but also it's more information and context for others to understand how that research was produced, and to share your success stories. We're always interested in knowing how the community is implementing and benefiting from our infrastructure. And last but not least, to mention that implementing persistent identifiers is a way of implementing the FAIR principles, and also through persistent identifiers and open metadata, you can both implement and promote open research practices. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. And we look forward to your questions.
Yeah, thank you, Gabby, and also thank Mohammed for such a nice presentation. And especially since we are also moving in a direction where our institutions are also thinking on the line of data repository and also implementing more and more open science practices, which is the way forward. So yeah, thank you. And we hope that this is just the beginning of our collaboration and we go a long way to make science more open. So now I would make the floor open for question and answer. For the questions to come in, if you want to ask it on camera, please raise your hand. I will call your name. Otherwise, you can type your question in the question and answer box. So please feel free to ask. Meantime, I will go back to there are some questions which I will take. So I think this is a question to Dr. Francis. It's impact on quantity and quality of research with open research data, specifically in Indian context. Do you like to take this up, Dr. Francis?
Can you please repeat the question, Mamita?
Okay, so someone is asking that what will be the impact on quantity and quality of research if we make the data open, and specifically in Indian context?
Oh, yes. Yeah, so as I said during the course of my presentation, when the data is made openly available, so it becomes transparent, and it becomes there's a possibility of someone reproducing that research, and then I mean, in the process, if somebody is re-evaluating that data and trying to find the methods that has been used to draw inferences for research work, whether it's correct or are there been any lapses or any biases. So now those things can be easily found out only when the data is openly available. So when I, as a researcher, when I make my data openly, make my data openly available, so I should have the confidence, I should have the integrity to ensure that my data, the fact that I've made my data, so whatever inferences and whatever conclusions I've drawn out of my research is is of high integral value. And surely it will improve the quality of research work, because I'm daring to put my data open, and the research output is, of course, already published. And if somebody wants to reproduce it, the data is already available. And this will have an impact on the quality of research, of course.
I see a hand raised, Said Anas Ali. Can you please ask your question? I don't see the hand raised anymore then. I will take, I think there are questions. One question was there to ask that where the data will be stored, because datasite will provide a DOI, but where the data will be stored. So Francis, you will take that up as
Yes,
a,
yes.
and then we can go back with that question with Gabby and Mohammed as well.
Yeah, see, now if you are using discipline-specific or subject-specific repositories like Zenodo or the Harvard Dataverse, now it becomes the responsibility of the data repository, centralized data repository, to assign a PID, and the data resides in such cases, it resides in the central repository. Now, on the other hand, if you set up your own institutional repository, the data will reside in the respective institutional repository, and the institute which implements the data repository will most probably use open source software. Now, it could be a CCAN, or it could be Dataverse, or any other open source software. And all the open source software meant for creating and managing data repositories provides the facility of integrating digital PIDs. Okay, so so as an institute, I set up my data repository, then I coordinate with the DataCite to obtain a PID, that is a DOI for my repository. And going forward, when every time a data set gets ingested into my repository, I assign a DOI for that data set. And it becomes globally resolvable.
Thank you, Dr. Francis, for explaining the process. I would go with both Mohammed and Gabby as well with the question, because they already are providing such kind of DOIs to many repositories, to explain a bit more. And also I would have one more question, and this is the last question, is that there's a question about file format, because all disciplines, the data that we generate can be in various formats, because some discipline it's more on some image file, some discipline is just data file, some discipline it can be in various formats. So what do you see there? How the data repositories are solving this kind of challenges? Thank you, both of you, please.
Yes, so regarding the previous question, as Dr. Francis mentioned, the repository is where the researchers deposit the data or the files or the content. What DataCite provides is the infrastructure to register identifiers, DOIs for that data, but we don't host or hold the files themselves. What our registry hosts is the identifiers and their associated metadata. So that in regards to the previous question, and in regards to the second question, we do not have any recommendations around file formats. Our metadata allows DOE to register information about the formats and the size of the file. In our metadata, though, we allow XML, JSON, BibTeX, and RIS as metadata formats. And Mohammed or Dr. Francis, if you want to say anything else on this.
I think I do agree with you completely, Gabby. You almost provided a very detailed answer for this.
Yeah, if I can just pitch in here, the file format is not a concern actually. Now, again, the same question used to come up during the days of setting up institutional repository for research publications. So what type of file formats would the repository support? Now that is not the concern of the respective repositories. Now, respective repositories, I mean, as far as a data repository is concerned, will predominantly hold the raw data. Okay, so it is up to the people who are interested in using these raw data to download the data and then use whatever additional software is required to make use of that data. So the objective of a data repository is to hold the data, and the file formats is not of a concern. File formats will be of a concern if there has to be interoperability, the ability to be able to merge different data sets for more complex research issues. So then for the sake of interoperability, then the file formats concerns may be there. But otherwise, in a normal course, the file formats are of not concern as far as a data repository is concerned.
Thank you, Dr. Francis, for providing such a detailed answer. I think that right now it's very clear that how data repositories will be functioning. There were a lot more questions there, but I think Paul took care of it by providing various links. So we can finish it on time, on our time, 5 o'clock. So with this, I would end this webinar. And as I already said, that I hope that this is just the beginning of our journey where we can collaborate and make at least one functional data repositories in India with DOIs so that our researchers can submit their data and that can be citable. So we can start with that. Thank you all for joining today, and thank you, Dr. Francis and Gabby and Mohammed for your wonderful talks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Momita, for being such a wonderful MC. And thank you, Mohammed. Thank you, Gabby. And thank you all the participants for your very enthusiastic participation, enthusiastic and also active participation. So we look forward to having more such programs and hoping to have more data repositories coming up in the country in the days ahead. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic day ahead.
Thank you so much, everyone, and looking forward to expanding our collaboration with you and with Indian institution as well. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks to Jahanab also for making this infrastructure available and all the team at CPR.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Then we end
Thank
it
you.
here. Have a nice
Bye.
day. Bye-bye.